Welcome to the Stronger Together podcast. This is Henry Tosh. Today I'm talking to Bobbie Butters. I've known Bobbie for more than 7 years now, and in that time I've handled her at multiple international powerlifting events, and for the last couple of years I've also been her coach. Bobbie is a truly inspirational figure in the world of powerlifting. Her uniquely passionate approach to being on the platform has won her many admirers. She's one of the most thoughtful and genuine people I've ever met. Not only that, but her story of how she ended up where she is today is fascinating. And in this episode, we get to hear some of that story. Bobbie gives us a frank perspective of the hardships of elite athletes. And I hope you find our conversation educational and entertaining. And without further ado, I give you Bobbie Butters. So, the first thing I want to do is give you this. Do you know what that is?
Something from Euros. Oh my gosh, this is from my first win.
This is from your first win at Euros, and this is the second best lifter overall.
Oh my God, yes.
Who you only lost it on to Sunita on the last lift of the day. You were first.
Oh my gosh,
until
wow.
that. And you've also in the top.
Oh, is this the team medal?
This is your team silver medal because the team
amazing. Oh, that's incredible. Gosh, it's been a while since I've had a trophy.
So I've had that for 3 years. And
it's been 3 years, wow.
Well, 2.5 years, really.
Yeah.
And Sophie's been having a go at me for it being sitting in the house. Why haven't you given it to Bobbie yet? Because we've seen each other a lot of times since then. And I just always forget.
It's always, you're travelling via train. Yeah. Whereas like today, I can literally put it in my car.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I don't forget it.
So yeah, if you forget that, I can't take it home because Sophie just won't let it in the house. So you need to give it to Bobbie. I was like, okay.
Oh my gosh. God, I remember that competition well. Wow. Oh, thank you very much.
That's all right. Now, there are a few things we could cover with this, and we could probably do an entire podcast just on Sheffield.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, definitely.
But I think a lot of people probably want to hear your story as much as anything.
Yeah.
And if we get onto Sheffield, we do. But if not, we can always come back and do another one. Can you describe how you first got into the world of fitness and sport? Can you look back and describe that?
Yeah, I can, definitely, like from a very young age. So like, health and fitness. I think the best place to go from is when I was about 8 years old. Mm-hmm. And I decided I wanted to be a personal trainer when I was 8 years old because I loved sort of helping people. I loved fitness. I loved watching Rocky. That was a big inspiration, but I was much younger when I started watching Rocky. And I remember saying to my mom, like, I wanted to be a personal trainer. And that was it sort of sat with me then, literally. And then I remember in year 9, I'd already like started to go around gyms asking if I could work at the gym.
So year 9, how old are you in year 9 for our
13,
international?
13, yeah.
So you're a 13-year-old and you're living in the north of England and you've started to go around gyms.
Asking if I can work
as a 13-year-old.
As a 13-year-old, yeah. I mean, I talk about strange, but I really wanted to. Like, I wanted to learn about it. Like, I had like posters on my wall, weights in the gym, weights in my room. Sorry, like. I just loved it. I loved I remember I was probably still in primary school, maybe just going in secondary school, so around the age of 10, 11, and I'd made all of my family, like my brother, my mum and dad, like program cards, like handwritten program cards to help them. My mum wanted to lose weight, and like I just wanted to help my dad with various things and stuff like, and I just loved doing it. And then I used to like just play around with weights and like, if I do this, does this feel like this or something like that? And then when I was 16, I then went to college and did my personal training qualification. I was so set on it from such a young age, and it never left me to want to do that.
When you wrote these program cards, where were you getting the knowledge to write these cards from?
I sure made them up a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It could have been anything really. My dad's kept them, but also I remember with one of the sets of weights that I brought, like with my own birthday money when I was like 10 or 11, they were like, those Argos packs.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those.
They're like vinyl weights.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So like, and there would be, like those posters of different muscle groups and different exercises attached to them.
Were they the weeder posters?
Something like that. Yeah, that sounds familiar. And yeah, I just used to pick things, but this sounds like it'd go together. Like maybe we could do that. And I used to mess around with them in my room and stuff. Like, yeah, that's just how it all started, I guess, from there.
So, what about playing sport at the same time? Were you playing sports?
Yeah,
from a young age?
Yeah, right from when I was really, really young. You know, you're talking as soon as I could be part of a sports team, I was. Probably in primary school, maybe 6, 7, I was like playing football in the field. Not that I can play football. Please bear this in mind. But like I used to play netball, basketball. Like I played everything. And when I was in high school, any team I could be part of, I was part of it. Like I just wanted to do everything. I was never like the best at sport tactically wise, but I could run fast. And like I played hockey for a long time, like 5 years competitively, like at the regional level, if you will, and did tournaments and things. And like I was just the one that could run quick, push people out the way. And then like, yeah, just how I got myself into the sport. And then I did like, you know, your sports days and stuff like that. And I do everything that I could.
So from that age, would you say hockey was the sport you did to the highest standard?
Hockey and sprinting.
And
100-meter
sprinting.
100-meter sprint.
So did you run for a club?
Not a club,
Athletics,
just all
school?
my school, all through school. Yeah, so I remember I did, when I was in high school, did the 100 metres and I got asked if I wanted to join a running club. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, I wasn't able to at the time. So, yeah, I just sort of did it at school. Like everything was through school, which is really fortunate that I had those opportunities, I guess, as well.
So were you using weights this whole time?
Yeah.
You were?
Pretty much, yeah.
And is that at home or in a gym?
Mostly at home, yeah. I remember my mum and dad had this multi-gym thing in the garage when I was like 3. And like I just used to go and play on it and just be like, can I move this? Oh, look at that. And I used to like move like my furniture around my bedroom and like just to see if I could move them. I was always upset I could never move my wardrobe. It was far too big. And so like, yeah, just from like the age of 3, there was some form of exposure to lifting something.
That's interesting because obviously you had the equipment there, but that doesn't always mean that the person's going to be motivated to use it. So there was something intrinsic that made you want to test how strong you were from an early age. Can you put that down to anything? Can you think what that might have been? Or
not really.
I mean, you said you watched Rocky, but I don't know if that would be enough to make you...
No.
Maybe was it the training scenes in that
the
made
training
you then
scenes
want to...
I loved. Even to this day, before bench, one of the soundtracks on my 3rd attempt, from like one of the soundtracks from, you know, the training montages.
Gonna Fly Now, is it that one? Is that
very close? In the warm-up room it is. For my final bench, it's always No Easy Way Out.
No Easy Way Out.
Yeah. And like...
From Rocky 4.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm impressed. You know
where he's driving the car.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. So,
I know all the Rocky films well.
I love it. I love it.
And he's
Rocky
having
so
flashbacks
much.
to Apollo and that.
That's it. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's just brilliant. And I just remember like in primary school, like trying to do one-handed push-ups like he does on top of the mountain and stuff like that. Like I found it fascinating, you know, that you could do this with your body. And so just something in me was like, well, I want to see if I can do that. And like there was this one time in primary school, I was definitely like 5, 6, something like that. And like we were lifting buckets of water and the lads were lifting 2 buckets of water and we were walking a certain distance. Well, I was like, well, I don't want 1 bucket of water. I want to see if I can pick up 2. So I did. I picked up 2 buckets of water. And so there was just always something in me that wanted to know if I could lift it or not. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
I wonder how much of that came from that film.
I know, I wonder.
Inspiring you.
Yeah,
I mean, if you'd never watched that film at that age, whether your life, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? If it was all from being inspired from that film.
And it just had that knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Because Rocky's always been like a big, even now, like, you know, the posters, the sayings, all that sort of stuff. There's something in me that is like embedded something for sure. And I just loved seeing if I could lift something.
You know, what's depressing, Bobbie, is I went up to 2 people in the gym the other day, 2 younger lifters. I think they're both just under the age of 20. And a song from Rocky came on and I said, like, yeah, this song. And they were like, what's this off? And I was like, well, Rocky. And they went, what's that? Yeah.
That hurts my soul.
What's that?
What's that? Oh,
And I was just
no.
like, I think the face I made, they were like, oh God.
We should know this.
So I don't even know where to start with you two. Like, if you don't even know it, I don't know.
Oh, no.
So that's the state we're at now. It's so old now that a lot of young lifters now have never even heard of it. That's depressing, isn't it?
Wow. That is like, I'm getting older.
Lucky. So you're 16. So when did you do your first barbell sports competition? Because I know you did weightlifting and powerlifting. Which one did you compete in first?
Powerlifting first.
That was your first. And can you remember how old you were?
17. I just
17.
turned 17.
So you're at college studying
personal training.
Personal training. Is this a BTEC?
NVQ.
NVQ, right. So you're doing NVQ in personal training. What made you do a powerlifting competition? Like, what's the process that brings you to that comp?
It was really cool, to be fair. So when obviously when you're doing your personal training, you learn how to lift and you learn how to teach people how to lift. And I remember there was a group of us and we were like learning how to deadlift. And it's like some of the people that I was like with, like some of the guys, were like, "How much can you deadlift?" And I was like, "I have no idea. Literally never done it before in my life." Obviously, at this point, I'd been lifting, but nothing specifically in any form of controlled manner. And I was 50 kilos at the time, and there was 100 kilos on the bar, and I lifted it. And what's really cool is that someone took a picture of me doing that, and I didn't even know. Then they sent it me afterwards. So I literally have a picture of my first ever time ever powerlifting in any form of fashion, and lifting 100 kilos at 50 kilo body weight. And I'm like, that's really cool. My dad's actually got it up in the living room. And I'm like, that is such a significant picture now, like looking back. Yeah. So then literally that same day, there was one of the college tutors, Martin Beastle, who I believe even has a gym now in the Midlands, which is where I'm originally from. And he said, "Have you ever heard of powerlifting?" I was like, "No, this is a sport. You can lift things and be competitive." And then like 3 months later, I entered a competition. And then that was kind of it. That was my entrance into barbell sports.
So what had you done? So you did your first ever deadlift.
Yeah.
And then you did your comp 3 months later. What did you do in that meantime? Because obviously you must have trained for it.
I did, but nowhere near the structure that I have done the last sort of 10 years, if you will. Like at first it was like I go in and kind of do what I feel like, do what I enjoy doing, like experimented with different things. And obviously just sort of lifted. I was very fortunate that Martin would talk to me about it and do bits and pieces, but I just sort of went and like lifted a bit. I did a lot of, because we were learning about sort of linear progression, did a lot of 5x5, and just very simply added a little bit of weight and that type of thing. Obviously I didn't have a specific coach. I just sort of, I'm learning how to do it, so why not coach myself how to do it? So yeah, that's how it sort of started. Then I did.
You could do a lot worse than do that. Start on 5x5.
Absolutely.
And just put it out. I mean, what about learning the rules of the lifts and like the judges? And can you remember how that came about? Because you don't want to go into a comp not knowing what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that Martin sort of dove into that. And then I was with BDFPA, so British Drug-Free Powerlifting Federation, Association, sorry. And I definitely read the rule book and stuff like that and just had an idea of what to expect. My first ever competition was a push-pull, so it wasn't even squatting.
Oh, okay.
So it was just a push-pull.
Just bench and deadlift.
Just bench and deadlift, yeah, which was really cool. And yeah, just the nerves I got that day, I reckon they're higher now. I was very nervous to the point where I was like nearly sick and nearly pulled out. I was that nervous. I was absolutely beside myself, so nervous. And I was like, I'm just going to go and do it.
Can you remember what you lifted?
Something along the lines of a 110 deadlift-ish and a 52 bench-ish, give or take, something like that.
And how much did you weigh at the time?
I weighed in at 50 kilos. Yeah.
Your first. And after that comp, how did you feel?
Oh, it was incredible. I loved it. And I'd like borrowed equipment. Like I didn't know you needed deadlift socks, for example. Yeah. So I had like someone else's deadlift socks on someone else's belt. Never lifted with a belt before, but like Martin was there at the competition. That's how I knew. And he was training one of the other students.
So the first time you lifted with a belt was in the competition?
In the competition, yeah. Because I didn't have one. Yeah.
That's not optimal for anyone who's listening.
No. Well, we have, it goes further than this, guys. I was in Nike trainers.
Nice.
Standard, right?
Yeah.
And then I didn't even have a singlet. I had like shorts and t-shirt, a Michael Jackson t-shirt underneath my vest top. Like that's, and then obviously you could take the t-shirt off back in the day when you did your deadlift. So I took that off then. And I just go for it. That's how it started.
So you've done that push-pull. Do you think at that stage you already knew this was the path you wanted to go down, doing these type of sports, or was that still...
I'm not sure, when I think about it, I just was like, seemed really logical to me, like, I qualified for nationals. Well, I'm going to go and do that now. And then at that nationals, it's like, okay, what's next? It wasn't like I'm going to do this. It was, let's do this one. Oh, let's do this one. This is over here. Right, it's cool. Let's go and do that.
So you do the push-pull. What is the next comp you do?
I believe it is nationals.
So straight to nationals?
Yeah, straight to nationals, I think. No, wait a minute.
Because
I feel like there was an SBD actually. No, there was an SBD at the same gym.
Would have done nationals as a single lift, you'd have had to done then.
Yeah.
Because in the BDFPA, you could do squat, bench, or deadlift.
Oh, of course
on
you
its
can.
own.
Yeah.
Which you can't obviously do in the IPF.
No. So I definitely did another competition to do all three.
So
first,
okay.
in that gym. Because I went to that gym twice in Dudley, and then I did nationals. I remember that.
Okay. And how did that go?
That was great. I believe I broke a deadlift record on that day because you could do fourth attempts.
That's right. Yeah.
So I did a fourth attempt.
That wouldn't count your total, would it? But it would count as the record.
Yeah, that's right. So I did the I think I made what I lifted. I'm unsure. Maybe some because it wasn't that long after that first one. I think I squatted maybe 100 plus. Benched maybe 55 perhaps. And then deadlifted, I think the record was like 137, something like that.
And then, so you've done your first nationals, BFPA, and you're 17 at this stage? 16,
yeah, I'm
17?
still 17, yeah.
What about from then? How does your lifting career progress from that point?
So let me try and think. Because I know at one point, once I'd qualified as a personal trainer, I then started working as a personal trainer and then went into Olympic weightlifting. And I did both for a little while. So I think after nationals, I can't remember if I did 1 or 2 nationals, but then you qualify for the WDFPA, something like that, right. World Drug Free.
Because I've lifted at that one before. Because I started off BDFPA. So
of course you did, yeah. The interesting structure of the competition.
Yeah, I remember weighing in at 8 a.m. and then lifting at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, like that same, like something along those
lines. Did my last deadlift and it was like midnight, I think.
Yeah, we had a similar situation. You had like 3 hours rest between bench and deadlift and things like that. Yeah. And so I remember being like, I want to do the best I can. Then I'm going to go into Olympic weightlifting. And I was hoping to go to the Olympics. That was kind of in my mind, like, road to Rio type thing.
Yeah.
And then, so I did Olympic weightlifting for a little while.
Why did you start Olympic weightlifting in the first place? Was it just because you were learning it as part of your course?
No, I actually remember watching Rebecca Tyler on... Yes, yeah. She's incredible. I was in the gym. I was already working in the gym, and I remember it so distinctly. And she did like a snatch on like the news. And I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. I'd love to learn how to do that. Obviously, that's next level artiste type work. And I don't even know how, but I managed to find a weightlifting coach. Now, he was the head of the youth development at the time. And it wasn't too far away. When I think about it, there was a lot of traveling when I was at college. And so, I did both for a little while I finished doing the WDFPA competition. Then I went full weightlifting, probably for about a year to 18 months before things slightly changed from there.
And why? So what was the best result you achieved as a weightlifter?
So I was in the 52s, I want to say. I know they've changed now, but I'm pretty sure it's 52s. And I did a 62.5 snatch and an 85 clean and jerk.
And why did you then stop weightlifting?
It's very multifaceted, I must say.
What the answer is? What was multifaceted? The
answer is very multifaceted, yeah. So essentially what happened, in a long story short, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is when my back pain was awful. It's the only way to describe it. Absolutely awful. Like I was really struggling with my back pain whilst I was still weightlifting, and it took a lot for me to come out of it. I'd started uni. That's how long I'd been doing it for, and then it was so painful. I was like, I couldn't even stand, like, without my back.
What was the condition? The back condition?
It was essentially just like chronic tightness. So chronic fatigue and chronic tightness, I learned, go hand in hand. So my body was chronically fatigued, didn't have a period for 3 years, that type of level of chronic fatigue. Trying to stay in a weight class I had no business being in. So 52 kilos is not in my future.
Yeah, to anyone who was spreading that... Anyone who was spreading that rumour before Sheffield, as I said,
to God, no.
unless we cut a leg or an arm off, that's not happening.
Not happening, yeah.
No.
So trying to stay in the 52s, even at 18, made me not have a period for 3 years.
That was what caused it, you
It
think?
was one of, yeah, I mean, as well, I was on the implant as well. So like there was a combination
birth
of
control
things.
implant,
Yeah, the
yeah.
birth control implant. But then having a break from that and all the rest of it, I was like, me staying at this body weight is unhelpful. But British weightlifting did want me to stay in that weight class, and I understand, because I was more competitive, and I was on the in the Olympic development squad. But essentially, I decided to pull out of the Olympic development squad because my back was in just absolute agony, and it was almost like it was spreading around my body. You know, my hips started aching more, and it was just, I'd be crying like in between sets. I'd be in that much pain, but like still trying to lift, and I wasn't lifting very efficiently either when I was doing Olympic weightlifting. So it was very much like almost muscling everything.
You were bullying the weights rather than...
I was bullying the weights,
okay.
absolutely. And I had, that's one thing actually to add to your question specifically. My lordosis was intense, a very, very lordotic spine. Like there's a picture when I first started Olympic weightlifting, and it's like a duck. It's so bad. And like basically I couldn't move my pelvis individually from the rest of my body. It was like that was just stuck.
What did that come from? The training?
I think so. Combination of the training. Naturally, I have a naturally more lordotic spine, and also I was born with flat feet. So we think that I went to see like a fantastic osteopath at that sort of time, and like she gave me really fantastic insight into what my body was doing and what it couldn't do at that time. And like my feet was a big part of all of this, which meant that I had like an anterior pelvic tilt. My spine
So
was...
they were passing this problem up.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you already had a natural lordosis and you add this on top of it was...
Yeah. There was a lot of different things. That the reports that I got from this lady was fantastic, to really try and dive into this. I feel really fortunate, because this is when I learned all of this. I was in my first year of university as well. So I was learning about my body at the same time as learning all of these different things. So I found that quite helpful, but also quite daunting at times. Like, oh my God, I actually can't move my body very well at all. And like, you know, I couldn't really, for a lot of my career at that age, at that sort of stage of my life, I couldn't deadlift. I'd do a deadlift session and my back would spasm, and for 10 days, and I would really struggle to do another one. So my deadlifters, the fact that I can now deadlift more than once a week is unbelievable to me. So
now, so try and unpack some of that. You're 18. So you're, I mean, an adult, but not, you know, an adult by law.
yeah.
Just, had you been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome before you pulled out of the Olympic programme?
No.
Or did that happen afterwards?
It sort of happened afterwards. So I remember sort of learning about it as part of my course, and I spoke to a few people about it, and I had like all of the symptoms of chronic fatigue, and the chronic tightness was a big one. And it was one of those where when I went to uni, all I wanted to do was sleep. But I remember even before I left for uni, I'd like get on the bus to go to training, and I'd fall asleep like that. And then wake up when my bus stop would go, train for 4 hours, and then go to work. Like, and I just then sleep like immediately. And that happened, that went on for like a year of just like falling asleep completely immediately, trying to stay in the 52s, whilst also doing life work bits. Unhelpful.
It sounds like
Too much.
if we're trying to get stronger, we need our body to be well fueled, well rested, all these things. And it sounds like so much of that's counterproductive what you were doing at that stage sounds so counterproductive.
Absolutely.
Now, it might be difficult to say this, but for me as an outsider looking in, I would say that whoever was in charge of looking after you from British weightlifting, their duty of care went missing at that stage, because they've got an 18-year-old girl who they're asking to almost starve themselves just because it fits their agenda. To me, that doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel looking back on that now, the way that you were treated as an 18, like, imagine you had a daughter, an 18-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
How would you feel if British weightlifting or any organisation put your daughter through that?
Yeah, it would absolutely, like, it's very difficult to look back and be like, wow, that was quite an intense period. And if it was my daughter, I would be wanting to question things for sure. I think some of it as well, I'm very good at hiding how much I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So how aware my coach was of what I was doing to make weight, I'm unsure when I think back. I feel like they knew that, like, my body weight was naturally going up to 56, 57. So to drop to 52 was quite a challenge. But I did feel that pressure to be in the 52s, whether that was from myself and from the coaches. But yeah, I do think we know a lot more about these incidences now for weight class sports, especially for younger males and females. So yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult.
See, I think as females especially at that age are so vulnerable to so many problems, from like eating disorders and similar things that go along with it.
Absolutely.
That a lot of girls don't need a lot of pushing to go into those problems. Mm-hmm. And if you're forcing a girl to stay at a certain weight because it suits the sport, the chances of them developing a problem, a serious problem, either then or a little bit later on, are just magnified massively.
Absolutely.
And like I say, I hope you're right. I hope that now people are more aware about it, because you're messing with someone's life.
It is, absolutely.
And it just isn't worth it at that stage for a sport which, you know, no one's earning a fortune from these sports. It's not like they're taking home millions of pounds a year for weightlifting and powerlifting. So you've got to take their long-term health massively into account when you're doing 100%. This. So it sounds like you're in a bit of a state at this stage physically.
Yeah.
You're at uni. Your body has basically been shutting itself down. Mm-hmm. You then pull away from weightlifting. And do you recover from all this stage? How do you go about putting yourself back together and getting back to?
It's a long process, yeah. So I definitely was quite low. It was like, I'd lost part of my identity. I know people sort of use that, but I understand where that came from. And I knew that I wasn't someone that put all of my eggs into one basket, hence why I was at uni, whilst also being an athlete of some description at that time. And I just kept learning, and I put on a lot of weight necessarily so. I decided to not go on contraception, all that sort of stuff, so I had a clear picture of where my menstrual cycle was at. And I don't think that was as conscious as maybe what that would be now, but that was what I thought back in the day. And I was very fortunate. I was surrounded by people who was on my course, which helped me quite a lot. That they helped me lots. I had someone help me with my programming, and we built things back up. And I went to see the osteopath. Like, I was traveling from Preston to Birmingham to go back to the osteopath, and then I had a physio. What I used to see, I still see this physio to this day. He's fantastic, and like twice a week, every week. And the university was amazing because I got that for like £10. Which is unbelievable to a student. And so that was so helpful. It
sounded like you needed it though.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Like I just felt like I was in pain all the time. Like, there was some nights where I'd sleep on the floor because I couldn't sleep in a bed. It was too painful. And like sometimes I remember I just want to rip my back off and put it somewhere else, and chronic pain that you're dealing with for a long time, it can really start to impact your mental health and things like that. So I'm really trying to tick the boxes I need to tick to help myself. I was lucky that I was surrounded by so many human beings. It was so helpful, and in the environment that I was in. So gradually, over time, I then got to a crossroads and I had to decide. I felt like I wanted to decide, do I go back to powerlifting and go with the GBPF, or do I go back to weightlifting? And I was in this crossroads for a little while where training wasn't as painful anymore, and I felt like a bit more in control of what my body was doing, and I was learning, etc. Like there were still days it was more painful than others, but I was like, okay, I'm at this stage. And I remember asking myself, I did like a pros and cons of weightlifting.
Did you actually write it down?
I wrote it down. I hope to God that paper is somewhere in my uni work, because
Amazing.
I split the page into 4 pros and cons of powerlifting and weightlifting. And the first
This is such a Bobbie thing as well. Anyone's watching this, this is such a Bobbie thing to do.
It is.
It's just to get a book out and write it down by hand as well, not on a computer.
By hand, absolutely.
See, if I was doing
Pen
this,
to paper.
it'd be on a spreadsheet. But Bobbie, no, it'll be on a bit of paper.
Yeah, literally pen and paper. I love that. Everyone works differently.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets scare me. But yes, and the first thing I wrote down was I love powerlifting. And I remember clear as day. And I went into my partner at the time, who was incredible at helping me during this phase of my life. And I went, that's what I've written down. And he went, well, you've kind of answered your question there.
Point 1.
Point 1. And I'd written more. I didn't stop. And yeah, I went. So I then did a team competition with someone who I knew from the gym, who had just started up powerlifting. So they did a team competition. And I love the fact that I call them my powerlifting parents. The Joe Whiteleys were at the competition. Joe Whiteley, female, weighed me in. And Joe Whiteley, male, announced my first competition. So I think that's really special. And I remember that so clearly. And then it just went from there. I was like, have I qualified for nationals? Oh, great, right, let's go and do that. And here we are.
That competition has sort of gone down in folklore in Northwest powerlifting, I think, because we obviously both know the Joe Whiteleys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, female Joe still talks about weighing you in and taking your squat opener and double checking it was right with you, because she thought it was too high.
Yeah.
She's like, you sure?
Yeah.
And she says that's her abiding memory of that first thing.
Love
is
it.
just checking the fact that your opening weight was correct, because it was too much.
I love that. Oh, bless her. They're so supportive, and I love it.
They've
Time I see them,
literally been there from the start of your, because
start.
obviously for people who don't know, that it's a different federation to what you were lifting in before.
BDFPA,
Before
yeah. Oh,
you were
yeah.
in the British Drug Free Powerlifting Federation, which by the stage we're at now, where you've come back a few years later, the IPF or the GBPF, which is the British equivalent of the IPF, now has classic powerlifting as a thing. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, the BDFPA was the king of classic, but now classic is massively blown up. You've gone into this team comp as a classic powerlifter in the IPF affiliate, so you're on this IPF track now of being in this route. And obviously that went well, the team comp.
Yes.
And that's the start then of your proper powerlifting.
Yeah.
You fell in love with it in the BDFPA, but then you grew into it.
Yes.
In British powerlifting, or GBP. It was called GBPF.
It was
but
called
it's now
GBPF.
called British powerlifting.
British powerlifting,
So it's obviously been rebranded. Was the next one nationals after that, or did you do any others? It was, wasn't it?
I'm pretty confident it was, because the team competition, you did all 3.
Yeah.
So I remember asking Joe at the end, have I qualified for nationals? And then, it was junior. I was a junior. I was like 21, maybe 22, perhaps. And I went to nationals.
How much did you weigh for that comp? Can you remember what weight class you were?
Oh, I'd gone up to 63s. So I was in the 63s as a junior.
Okay.
I think
compared to 52.
Oh, very,
which is obviously
very different.
So this is a much healthier, stronger.
Yeah, I was like 61. So when I was at 63, I sat at 61 kilos. I'd gained necessary weight for my body. My body needed that weight at that time, definitely.
And how did that nationals go? Can you remember your first nationals?
It was really good. I remember it was something had happened with the weigh-ins, I think, so it was a lot longer. But I think what happened was powerlifting went through this era in Britain where we used to do competitions on one day, like nationals would be one day, maybe 2 days, and it would take a lot longer than anticipated because obviously more people are entering and all that sort of thing, so it's growing, and it meant that like my weigh-in changed by like 2 hours, something along those lines. Still very well ran competition, but I remember that being an issue, and I used to not eat at comps. So I remember it was the day I made that stir fry. So I was really nervous. And the first thing I ate was trying to eat a stir fry, and I'm gagging on this stir fry. And it was tofu stir fry. And so like every part of it was making me gag. I'd been at the venue maybe for 4 hours by this point, so I really hadn't eaten very much at all.
Were you vegetarian?
I was vegan for a few years.
Okay.
Yeah, vegan for a few years.
Because that's the only way you choose a tofu stir fry, isn't it?
I mean, I enjoyed it as a vegan, but
did you really? That? No, I'm joking.
I made.
I feel the hate coming on in the comments already.
I love cooking, so I used to try and work out how can I make tofu, like crispy tofu and things like that. So the texture would be different, but like nothing was going down. I was so nervous, I felt sick, and yeah, it went really well, the whole competition. I believe I came away with all the records, if I remember correctly, which is pretty cool. Even deadlift, if we can believe that, guys. Even deadlift. I think I deadlifted 165.
Joy wasn't at 63 then, was she?
No. Joy and her fantastic out of this world deadlift was not on the scene with me on that day. So yeah, I got... did I squat 160, maybe 155, something along those lines. Bench wise, maybe 85, 90, something along these lines. I could be completely off, guys, so please don't quote me on this. And yeah, I was getting closer to that 400 kilo total. I remember that bit because I remember being really close, but like, oh my gosh, I'm so close to 400 kilo total. So,
and that's only your second comp in British Powerlifting and GBPF at that stage.
That's correct, yeah.
Do you remember getting an email from me?
Do I remember getting an email from you?
About British selection.
Had you started?
I just started. Can you remember what year it was, your first British?
My first British was 2016, I think.
I think after your 2017 one,
yes,
I emailed you.
Yeah.
And normally when I email powerlifters, I get about 3-line reply. You sent me about a 6-paragraph full on.
Explanation.
I was like, what on earth is this?
What's this?
And it was basically...
I remember writing that email, actually.
It was me asking you about coming as an international lifter, and you basically wrote this really lovely, thoughtful response about you were considering your weight class and that you didn't want to necessarily go because you thought your future might be as a 57, and that actually... if you went as a 63, it would stop the process of you coming down as a 57. So it was a very polite rejection. It was a really polite rejection of coming onto the British team. But with it all fully laid out. And I remember it striking me that wasn't the normal type of email I got from a powerlifter. And I was like, oh my God, this is really in depth. She's really thought about this.
I remember writing that email. I was actually at work. And what was quite scary about that time for me, scary maybe is a bit strong of a word, but like I'd already had to turn down 3 international invites up to this point. So you were the first head coach I was able to say yes to later on that year. So right. Lawrence was when I was a junior. So I never actually competed as a junior internationally. I got asked 3 times and had to say no on all 3 occasions, which hurts my soul. When I think about now, like obviously how much I love it.
What were your reasons for turning
financially?
It was just
financially, yeah. I was in a difficult financial position when I went to university. The loan was like peanuts, as we all know, guys, who is a student. And then one of them as well, me and I even went to the squad. So I'd actually said yes to this, but I went to squads and unfortunately picked up an injury. And me and my physio had to make a horrendous decision to say no. And I had to put the information.
Wasn't the bar misloaded?
Yeah.
At a squad session, and did you tweak your back?
I tweaked my glute.
Tweaked
my glute. Yeah. And I didn't think too much of it. I was like, oh, like just a bit of a spasm or whatever I thought at the time. And then we had to make a decision because it was hurting me to squat and it was hurting me to deadlift because I'm still recovering from injury at this point with my back anyway. And so I remember going into my physio had been saying Like, no, he's really good. He would never say to me to do something. He'd wait till I approached him. And I remember saying, do you think it's a good idea to do this competition? And he was like, if I'm honest, no. And obviously this is my first international that I could have done. And so I made the decision. I chose longevity over a quick sort of go and do it because I really wanted to do it. I knew the numbers people were lifting at that level, if you will, like without going into details. I had an idea, maybe podium, perhaps at that stage. And so I turned it down. And that's when we had our conversation, not that long later.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is, I do remember you mentioning even then my one about the financial situation.
Yeah.
You were saying that, you weren't flush with cash and it was a big decision because it was finance as well.
My university helped me with that competition.
I remember you saying, you saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember that part of the email. Because I think you said, basically, can I get back to you when I found out about the funding from the university? So yeah, no, I appreciate all that. And I think the difficulty is, if you say no to an international invite, you don't know if that's your last ever one.
I know.
So it is a hard call to make. Mm-hmm. I've said this to a lot of lifters over the years, that those medals or trophies you get at internationals, that might be your one shot. So saying no to one, especially like, let's say you're not guaranteed to win, but let's say you had a good chance of being on the podium at all those internationals. Those are medals and trophies you can never get again because you can't go back in time and do it.
No.
And you don't know. I remember saying this to Annie Nelson at her first international. Obviously, she's done loads since then. But I was saying, look, treat it like it's going to be your only one because you don't know.
You just don't know.
So being able to say no, I can understand there's a lot of soul searching that goes into that. And also, you don't want the coach to think, oh, this is
not interested.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And you're not one of them, but there are some lifters who are like that aren't like just aren't fully committed.
Yeah.
They're sort of getting by on talent alone, and they don't tend to last very long. Yeah. So I know I really appreciate how, and you did get across in the depth of that. Do you know what? I'll tell you a funny story. We this is luckily I can't even remember the lifter's name, so I can't get myself in trouble. We were doing a squad session for this is when Jason, who was the junior coach, and I was the senior coach, we used to run everything together. So juniors and seniors would be in the same competition. Juniors at the beginning of the week and seniors at the end.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So we'd always go out together and we'd help each other for like 9 days. So it was just like this epic thing, like 9 full-on days. And we were running a junior squad session, and Jason said, right, you've all got to post a total, all you juniors, because it was so competitive in the squad session, and we'll use the totals you post to select the team. And unfortunately, about 3 of them bombed out. They didn't.
Dear.
At a squad session.
Oh dear.
Which at this time went to show that powerlifting hadn't come on long enough yet. You had a lot of strong kids, but they just weren't well coached and they technically weren't very good. And they were bombed out on depth on squat. They just weren't hitting depth. And we had judges watching and said, like, we can't give it to you. And I remember one of the girls, she didn't do very well at the squad session. Her feedback was that she hadn't done very well, but she was then asked as a reserve, and he sent a nice email saying, like, we'd like to offer you the place to reserve. And it was a 1-line answer, and it was basically get lost from this junior lifter. But her Hotmail sign thing said, kind regards, and then the name. And I said to Jason, I said, it's hilarious because she said this really mean thing, and then underneath it says kind regards.
Oh my God.
So it said it's the most unwarranted kind regards you've ever seen. I was like, how? She obviously never got picked again. But
that like hits me. Like, how can somebody be so rude?
Yeah, that's the other end, because she basically, her ego had taken such a hit from the fact that she hadn't performed at squads.
I understand, of course.
She then got offered a reserve spot because it was, I'm better than being a reserve.
Oh God.
I've had people, do you know what? I've had some lifters now, and if I said the names, people would be shocked, who turned down reserve spots basically out of just pure ego, going in the past, that are like now quite well names, and I'm like, yeah.
Trust me, guys, a reserve spot can get you a lifetime opportunity.
And I went to 2 internationals as a reserve for IPF. Like, you might never get the chance to go to an international again. But his ego gets in the way. I'm too good to go as a reserve. I might not. I'll go as full or nothing else.
Pipe down. It's all right, you know.
So bear in mind that's the response I'm expecting. So I get your lovely one, And then we go and we end up going to, was your Lithuania your first one? Was
Lithuania.
that 2018?
2018 was my first ever official international, and I just turned 23.
And do you remember the venue? In that, it was underneath
Kunas.
that. Yeah, so it was underneath that basketball arena.
Oh God, yeah, it
So
was.
there's that huge basketball arena because
Yeah.
in Lithuania, basketball is a proper sport. It's a professional sport, and it's like almost like football. Like the teams are like
Makes sense.
really well supported.
Wow.
So we were in that venue, weren't we? And it was like a little amphitheatre.
It was.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was this weird
I do.
amphitheatre, and then the warm-up area was like next to the restaurant. Do you remember that? And they had like a curtain separating it off from the restaurant.
Yeah,
And
I was amazed by all this. I loved it.
It was that warm area had about 8 racks and not room for 8 racks. So there's people tripping over stuff all over the place. And do you remember what happened on your opening squat?
Oh yeah, I
You
went
fell
onto my
over,
toes.
yeah.
I did my ballerina squat properly, face planted this front judge. That's how I describe it.
Yeah. So your first squat. So you were doing your warm up. It was it Jason and I handling you? It was, wasn't it? Was it the two of us handling you?
I believe it was. Yes.
And
Paul was around as well.
Paul was handling Joy.
Yes. I remember this. Yes.
And you stumbled on that first squat, and Jason and I were like, "Oh."
You trusted me enough to go up though.
We did, but not as much as we wanted, because we looked at each other and we were like, "Oh, the plan is to go up." Like the plan was to go up like 7.5. And I think did we go up 2.5 or something? Like we only went up a bit.
Only a bit, yeah, or like maybe 5 kilos, maybe.
The reason you fell over was you came up so quick. You just lost balance.
And like one thing that used to happen all the time with my squat is where my stance was at that time, it was too sort of narrow for my ankle range of motion availability.
Yeah.
So what happened is if I'd push too far into my knees, and if I'm going very quickly, then essentially what happens is my heels lift, and if they lift too much, I can't counterbalance it, and therefore I launch myself forward. And I've been in many situations where that's happened twice in competition. Hence why I'm so nervous for my squats, guys. Because that just doesn't stop happening. You have to control it.
No, and the more you think about it, the more likely it is to happen, isn't it? The more in your head you are when you do it. You don't want to be in your head.
Absolutely.
You want to do your normal technique. And if you stand there and unwrap the bar and go, right, what do I do when I squat again?
I know, yeah.
Which is amazing, because I'm so a lot of lifters, a lot of really elite lifters, from the pressure of competition, step back and go, hang on a minute.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
Come again?
Because you're not used to being completely present when you squat. You're used to doing it on autopilot in training, because your technique gets so good you don't have to think about it too much. You go into a comp and you're thinking about it and you go, well, hang on a minute.
Trust the damn squat.
Yeah. But it's hard, isn't it, when there's all that pressure on? So yeah, so that was our first, but then I think, did you podium?
Came third.
Third, yeah.
And I got a squat and a bench silver, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that
I
sounds
remember
right.
being absolutely beside myself happy.
So that's you then in, isn't it, really? That's the proper start of Bobbie. She's on the international stage. She's done Euros, which is a proper comp at this stage.
Yeah.
Euros, EPF Euros in 2018. That's it, and powerlifting starting properly.
Yeah.
And we've obviously, you've been on this journey since then of, what's unusual is a lot of the people who are at the top in powerlifting now are actually relatively new. So if I look back now, we've got you and Joy and Durins and Tony. You're the sort of OGs, really, of the classic powerlifting. You've been there since like classic powerlifting really made it in, and you're still going. And now at the time, Durins was someone who went as a reserve, and people will forget this now because he's such a good lifter. He always used to absolutely thank me every time for taking him. He'd be like, "Coach,"
imagine this.
He'd be like, "Coach, it's a real privilege to be here. It's a real honour." He was always so humble.
Love him.
And now look at him. So the four of you have shown that it isn't just new people coming in and smashing it and doing. You've been there from that 2018, which is where it really started properly growing, all the way to now, and are still making international teams, still putting up PBs, all of you are. It's a real lesson in doing things week in, week out can bring you gains. You don't have to be coming from nowhere, smashing records out of nowhere, doing things. You can stick around, and if you work hard and do the right things and don't try and do the wrong things, you can be successful. Yeah. And you've obviously... How do you reflect on that 7 years or 6.5 years being in powerlifting? How do you feel about like looking back at that time period now?
feel very privileged. I feel very, very fortunate that I have been allowed these opportunities and I'm physically able to take these opportunities. Like powerlifting has taken me so many different places, physically, geographically in the world, and mentally and physically, like to points where I could never dream of, and I do feel so fortunate to have lived that. I was thinking about that on the drive up here, just like, wow, like I feel really lucky and really fortunate to be in this position and being able to explore my powerlifting potential in this arena, definitely.
And just think, like, that venue in Lithuania, and then compare that to where you were a few weeks ago.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's nuts, isn't it?
It's nuts. It's
Because
definitely
like you're like, I think I described it in my video. It's like being in the middle of a concert.
100%.
It's almost abstract that it's so different from where most of you guys started out competing. Because the thing is, at internationals, there's always a crowd, but it's just the other lifters, isn't it? Like
typically speaking,
you've pretty much got. You might have a couple of people watching.
Yeah, especially if you're like myself and Joy, who are like, start of the week, no one's there yet. And a lot of the time it was like me and like maybe 2-3 other GB lifters there, because obviously people are not going to fly in a week in advance, whereas I'm there for a few days before and I'm like the first people to lift.
Yeah.
So there really isn't many people in the crowd then.
Someone said, I don't know whose idea this was, and I'm gutted I can't remember who told me this, came up with an idea, and it initially sounds bonkers, but the more I thought about it, the more it sounded right, that for every competition, international, they should draw lots for the order of weight classes.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because it's always little to big, isn't it? It's just the way it is. And it means that the littlies, often the lighter weight classes, weigh in before the opening ceremony, which is like lunacy, and you don't get, and it builds throughout the week. And it means that often in some competitions, you always lift in the morning or you always lift in the afternoon. But if every comp, that order was just randomly assigned, it would be a much fairer to everyone involved. And often like the supers and the big guys don't like it because they don't get to enjoy the week very much because they're always at the end.
Yeah.
They can't really enjoy the process of being at a competition.
Absolutely.
Because some of you guys, at least after you've lifted, you can chill out for the next 3 days. You can go and watch your mates lift
Which
and all
is
these
amazing.
other things.
I love
Which is
that
the benefit
part.
of being the lighter weight classes.
Absolutely.
But the 120s, 120 pluses, 84s and 84 pluses never get that.
Nope.
I don't know. I think that would actually be quite cool. I think you'd get a lot of resistance to start with because this is not the way it's done.
No.
But I think the more I thought about it, after Sheffield told me, and I was like, actually, the more I think about this, the more this makes like it could work.
Interesting.
Because our comps at super training, we mix them up. So sometimes it's women on the first day, sometimes on the second day. So we move them around and try different things. And it's fine. It just works,
Nice.
Once if you know what day you're going to lift on from far enough out, what does it matter?
Yeah.
As long as they get the schedule right 3 months or 4 months in advance when they're setting the comp up, as long as they stick to that schedule, then it's absolutely fine for everyone. You just prepare around that time. So anyway, that could work.
Interesting point.
So what I want to talk about now is Malta World Championships.
Oh, sheesh. Yep.
Yeah. So I'd been coaching you for 6 months before Malta, and Malta didn't go very well.
No, it did not. No. That was a low point in my athletic career.
Do you think that's the lowest point in your career, athletic career, performance-wise?
I think so.
Take like personal side out of it.
Yeah, I think so, to be honest, because even though like Olympic weightlifting was difficult to come out of, that was definitely the big hit. It hit me, did the performance in Malta. It really, really did.
You came to a realisation not long after that, and what was that realisation that you came to?
So that realisation was I had every symptom that I'd researched about, or not even actively researched about, come across Red S. And that was when I truly realised that I was I'm very convinced that I had Red S because I had all of the symptoms that I had researched. And when I went further into it, I then realised I had more symptoms than I originally thought.
And Red S is?
And Red S is relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's typically caused by low energy availability can be accompanied by overtraining as well, but the main thing is low energy availability. So in a nutshell, not eating enough.
And it is particularly correlated with female sports. It isn't necessarily just women that get it, but if you look at the literature,
yes,
it seems to be more common with female weight class sports.
Yes, definitely. You're right there that both male and female athletes can get red S. But yeah, it does seem to be more so common in females, especially when you think of weight class sports and things like gymnastics and dance and things. Yeah.
So to describe it for people who aren't necessarily versed in the sort of biological language of and physiological language, what it basically means is that you're not giving your body enough calories to function properly. And what it does is it tries to cheat. So your body goes, I need to get this energy from somewhere. So it starts taking energy from systems which shouldn't be providing it. And that then means that you can be on a massive calorie deficit and still not lose weight. And then what happens is you get into a cycle because you keep cutting calories and the body starts taking this energy from elsewhere. So you're just in this sort of vicious cycle. One of the outcomes of that is performance, unsurprisingly drops off a cliff.
Yes.
Now, I remember the phone call where you told me about this, and I remember feeling guilty because it's communication with the coach is important, and I always think the coach should be aware of what's going on. And I felt bad that I hadn't picked up on enough.
Bless you.
But it's just a natural.
And of course,
it's a natural thing. And if you were a coach, you'd feel the same way.
Yeah.
But luckily, someone at your university, didn't they just basically take you to one side?
Yeah, she was actually like, so I'd already been thinking about this. I hadn't had the conversation with yourself yet, but one of my colleagues who is an incredible gem, and basically it was very bizarre. So I was in my caravan, where caravans typically are quite warm, and it was 40 degrees outside, and I was cold. So you talk about functions that your body can't do. I couldn't keep myself warm anymore, and I was wrapped up. And I said I had a Teams meeting with this colleague, and I was like, I'm not in my pajamas. I'm just wrapped up. And she immediately was like, I'm sorry, what? You're wrapped up?
One of the hottest days of the year.
One of the hottest days of the year. And she literally said, we need to look at your diet. And because obviously I'd done this research. I'd listened to a podcast about Red S because I thought it was relevant to my PhD. So then some of the pieces started to come together. And then I told her what my higher calorie day was. Didn't want to tell anybody what my lower calorie day was. And she was like, Bobbie, that is far too little for what you do. And so,
bearing in mind your lean muscle mass, low body fat, and all these other things, they typically prescribe your calorie intake up.
Oh, yes, I was not doing that. I was eating a scarily low amount of calories because of course, I'd lost control of my body weight. So my body weight would go to 60 kilos. So that I'm like, this is when I'm starting to question, do I go to 63? Because my body weight is stuck at 60 kilos and I'm on this low calories, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm trying to work this out. And then that's when I then had the conversation with yourself. And I was like, there's something not right here. I believe I have this Red S. These are all the symptoms. These are the habits I've gotten into and how I've been living. Where I realised before I'd even started to be coached officially by yourself, I realised they probably started before South Africa. When I actually think back.
I remember you saying that to me.
Yeah, so that was intense.
And also, I'd never heard of this. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. I'd heard people referring to it.
Same.
So the conversation you had with me, I was straight onto the internet.
I remember you saying,
and I went away and listened to about 3 or 4 different podcasts on it. And I was like, oh, goodness, I'd only ever heard it referred to. I hadn't thought about it as an actual thing with one of my lifters.
It's insane. Yeah, I was the same. That's how I ended up with the podcast myself. Because I was like, is this relevant to what I'm going to be studying? What I'm going to be doing my PhD on? And it was kind of a life-changing podcast, really. And then I went down the route of getting my nutritionist, who I still have now, who is actually a student of mine. I taught him in his first year. I asked this colleague of mine, would you recommend someone from the course to be I thought maybe I could be a case study for them or something like that. And there's this mature student, had a business of his own, and he's now doing dietetics like at a master's level. So he was top of his class. He's fantastic. He graduated officially last year. Is that right? Something like that. And so I've been working with him basically from our conversation. I then hired someone.
And we started having coaching calls, the three of us, didn't we?
We
On the
did.
same
Yes,
calls,
yes, we
which
did.
was really good.
Really helpful. Yeah, just to get everybody involved.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because I wanted him there so he could tell me what the score was at each stage, so that it was taken off my plate to a certain degree and we could build all of that in.
Yeah.
And that, to be honest, that was... I remember you saying you were embarrassed.
Oh, I was so embarrassed,
because the
so
thing
ashamed.
is, like, you and I are professionals in that field.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to you. I didn't spot it. Like, this is why I think this is an important topic for this podcast, because I don't know how many people there are out there falling into this same vicious circle that don't have someone to pull them out of it and don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Coaches as well might not know what's going on with their lifters. Constantly cutting calories, realizing nothing's working.
Yeah.
And you're putting your lifters into these positions.
Yeah.
And the only way out of it is to push the other way.
Yeah.
You've got to start eating more.
Yeah. Which
and
is
it's
scary.
so counterintuitive.
It is.
To a lifter struggling to make weight.
Mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
But what has happened since then?
Unreal. It's unreal, isn't it? Like the changes in my lifestyle in terms of eating and sleeping.
And you've hit lifetime bests in all three lifts.
Yeah.
And this is only in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And that turnaround could never have happened if you hadn't come to that real.
No.
You could have walked away from the sport, couldn't you? You could have looked at that result from Malta and just got so disheartened.
Yeah. I remember the night of Malta. I don't sleep anyway after competitions, but I really didn't sleep. I remember I was up all night. I got my notebooks and paper out and was like, right, what lifestyle changes do I need to change? And I was like, I knew something wasn't right. I just knew, something in me knew this is not right.
We had that big meeting. Do you remember? We met at that cafe in Malta and said, right, let's sort this all out.
Yeah, what is going on?
And we had no idea there was this big monster sitting in the background, that red S.
Absolutely.
We were looking at training times and exercise variations. Little did we know at the time, none of that was going to make a difference.
No, it was actually how little I was eating anyway, and then what it took to cut to 57 at that time was silly. It's very, very silly in my opinion on myself here. And how I actually got a total at Malta, really, I'm impressed. I didn't touch wood, get injured. And when I actually think about what it took.
You nearly podiumed.
You
only just came fourth, didn't you?
Right.
At the World Championships.
It would have taken like one lift, I think.
Yeah.
To come third.
Yeah. That's kind of insane, actually. I never even thought about that way.
Also, someone said this to me. I think one of my now ex-clients, don't coach at the moment, one of my ex-clients said to me that I lost out on 3 medals because of body weight.
Yeah,
that is actually insane when you actually think about it. But yeah, Malta was unreal. But I knew something else was going on, because something that Red S can impact as well, of course, your mental health naturally makes sense. And I remember Richard Parker giving me my Hall of Fame award. Do you remember that moment when everyone was surrounding me because I was in pieces? And I remember looking at it and being like, I don't deserve this.
I think you might have said something. I think you said that to me.
I even said it to you.
I think
actually.
you did.
Yeah, I think I did. I was beside myself.
Yeah, I think you said that to me.
And I couldn't look at it. I put it away and I was like, I don't deserve that. I haven't earned that. And what I decided to do is I put it up to remind myself of what I can do. But I also put up my Malta medals, because I got some silver medals from that competition. And I think I said something like, right, that's the side of what I wanted to achieve more on. That's the side to show me that I am worthy, you know? And that was, I knew just something wasn't right. Like, how do I feel so low in myself and things like this? And obviously the competition itself, the weights itself didn't go to plan. And then I was up all night and I just kept crying. remember, like, I was talking to my partner for ages, but I also just sat in my hotel room and just was crying and crying. And I was like, how much more can I cry? People who probably know me, I'm a very emotional person anyway. So crying is not like, oh my gosh.
90% of the Bobbie crying that I've had has been happy crying.
Yeah. This was like, you know, like when you're sobbing and you can't breathe. It was that.
Yeah, it's like a child who's just constantly
getting it out. Yeah. And so like I was like writing different things down. I wanted to talk to you about like my training, about like what I could do better and on all this, that and the other, and my nutrition. And I still have kept that because the nutrition was still, what do I do? It was still too low, even when I was looking at that. And I really was stuck on what to do. And I think part of me knew something was going on, and that's what made me look at that Red S podcast. Because I was like, I wonder what's going on. Because also I was having stomach issues. My stomach, even from South Africa, I remember we went to Arnold's, and I remember we had a conversation before the Arnold's, which was before Malta, that my stomach's in pieces all the time. Like, overshare trigger, guys, just to make sure people are aware. I'd be constipated for like 5 days. And again, that's...
when you turned up at Arnold's, your stomach...
Yeah, I hadn't gone to the toilet in like 6 days. Yeah. And that's very common for Red S as well, because essentially you're not giving your body enough to actually like do the function that it needs to do.
I think you were living in this sort of like performance deficit because you were still like Arnold's. You lifted well. Mm-hmm. You were still managing to lift well at a lot of these competitions, and it was only until Malta, which was the breaking point, which you still nearly podiumed.
Yeah,
but it was an obvious drop in performance.
Yeah,
everything had dropped off.
Mm-hmm. Because we were wondering as well, is it because it was nighttime? Because it was my first 7 p.m, which is my bedtime, by the way. 7 p.m. start
Loser.
Time. Like that's a lifting start time. Like, huh? What? So then I was starting to get used to weighing in at 5 o'clock. Well, my way of doing that at this stage of my life was not eating for 24 hours. And that's unhelpful. And part of me knew that, but I was like, well, help, what do I do? So that was, it was really challenging to go through that and to...
What do you think? So of the people listening to this, I'm sure there will be some like men or women who are in the middle of Red S, or the early stages or late stages. There'll be stuff they won't necessarily know, and listening to this might bring it out. What's the first port of call, would you say? So you were a lifter in that situation.
Yeah.
What should these people be doing from this stage?
So one thing I started doing, and obviously working with my nutritionist, it made sense. I got brave enough to eat more. It was very painful to begin with. So obviously what's happening is your body's not really used to digesting food, from what I understand. So it can be quite painful to start with because your digestive system is essentially being woken up. And I remember being scared to put rice on my dinner. Like, I remember telling you this. I think I told you that. Like, and I basically, it's a process. I had to accept, if I wanted this to work, my body weight's going to go up. It's got to go up a little bit, because at the minute I can't keep taking it down.
So they need to speak to a nutritionist.
Yeah, speak to a nutritionist. Even if it's just
tell their coach.
Tell their coach.
Tell your coach. That would be one thing I would say.
If you're concerned,
speak to your coach about it.
Absolutely.
And you should have a relationship with your coach where you feel you can do this.
I think so.
You need to be able to say, helpful. Coach, I'm a bit worried because I've got these symptoms and this and this. I just want you to know that I think I need to do something about it, so that they're involved. Because if you hide it from the coach, they can't build everything around that. They're going to just treat you like everything's the same, and they'll start wondering why things are changing. So I would bring your coach and speak to someone. As
soon as you sort of realise something yourself.
And then you have to make peace with the whole...
So perhaps what might be helpful is maybe some of the symptoms I noticed or realised over the sort of period of time. So one thing that happened was, so constipation was one of them. My stomach was always this weird, horrible bloatedness. and my period got lighter and shorter. So amenorrhea is the absence of a period. Red S is not necessarily the absence of a period, though of course that is also not helpful, especially if you're not on contraception, and your sort of natural occurring periods. So shorter and lighter. And I also noticed that basically I stopped being able to sleep. And this blew my mind. So basically what your body can do, and I hope, obviously I'm not a nutritionist, guys, so I might not be able to explain this exactly correctly, but essentially what happens is if you're not eating enough, your body won't let you sleep because it's hunting for food, essentially.
Wow.
It's waiting for you to give it food. So therefore I was really struggling to sleep. And I couldn't understand because I was so tired.
So you're tired, you can't sleep, so your body can't recover from the training and things as well because you're not getting the sleep.
This was Malta prep.
Yeah.
So those are some of the key things. Just off the top of my head, there's loads of different symptoms, but those are some of them. Obviously, the big one being your period, because it's something that happens every month, typically. Typically speaking, of course, not everyone has that. It can be a measure to use. And if you notice changes, and it's happened 3 cycles in a row, potentially go and get your blood work done.
Okay.
That's something that I'd recommend. So that's what we talked about straight away, wasn't it? Let's go and get your blood work done. Is estrogen, progesterone, and they actually did everything. As soon as I said to my doctor that my periods had changed, they lit everything. I've got tested for everything. Very fortunately, by the time my blood work came back, I was in a good position. See, ideally, it would have been good to have my bloods done at multiple stages of my menstrual cycle. And because it could have been that some parts of my menstrual cycle, my estrogen would have dropped a lot lower than maybe it should have done to be healthy. Very fortunately, nothing like that was picked up on. So then, from there, so get your blood works done, talk to people. If you do have some of these symptoms and you are concerned, that is really helpful. And then seek out for a nutritionist if you can.
Yeah.
And start eating more. And I know that's so easier said than done, really is. I remember my nutritionist said to eat bagels. That blew my mind. Which is
heavy, carby.
And ice cream. I hadn't had ice cream for years, which is bizarre when I think about that now.
But they're easy ways of getting calories in, aren't they?
Easy way of getting calories in, yeah. So we were looking for low fiber, high carbs, because basically I was still apprehensive about having too many carbs. I always had carbs, but it was an easy way for me to reduce my calories, was to reduce my carbs.
Yeah.
To get to the lower calorie day, and it was just so helpful. It was painful to start with, and it was like mentally I knew my resilience was going to improve because it was hard to eat, if you will.
Yeah.
At times. Very fortunately, I love food. So once I got into it, I was like, just keep going, just keep trusting the process. And then I did Girl Power. And that was a tester for a water cut.
Yes.
Because we thought, let's give a little bit of a water cut and a little bit of a gut cut a go. That's when I found out that my body needs a lot of water to function. So I have to drink like 4 litres of water to stay hydrated a day, which meant when I do my water cuts, I have to drink 8 litres of water, because I was
to force your body to let go of it.
To force my body to let go of it. It's got better at it now, and maybe because I'm in a healthier position, it does actually let go of it quite quickly. As we saw in the Sheffield prep, I got down to 57.2 like 3 days out, which I wasn't expecting. So we think that actually now the water cut can be shorter,
which is nice,
which is helpful. Yeah. So maybe 3 days instead of 5, which we might test out before Worlds to see if the same happens again. But essentially my body now, if I drop my calories a little bit, if I increase my water intake a little bit more, so go to that 8 litres, it drops it quite quickly, whereas at first it wasn't. So I remember Girl Power, I did 6 litres for 6 days, my body weight didn't move. Which is bizarre.
Isn't that nuts?
Absolutely bizarre. So I weighed in at Girl Power at like 59.6 because my body was still
Because it didn't matter
trying
body
to-
weight for Girl Power, did
No,
it? It was
it
just a
didn't,
GL
no.
competition. So
Yeah, just a GL competition. Ryan came, the girls came. So it was literally just a fun competition. And obviously I love Girl Power. I love the French lifting team. And obviously it's really fun. It's really cool. And it was my second time doing it. And I just loved that it was a comp I could take Ryan's daughters to, my stepdaughters. So that was really helpful, really insightful competition to do.
So you've now we've gone through the recovery process from Red S.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a position where, would you say you're like happy with diet and everything, and you're on top of everything?
Yeah.
And looking at an average week of training now, what's your energy level like? Is it good throughout the whole week? Is it up and down?
I'd say it's pretty good all week, especially when I'm managing sort of external stresses as best as I can, and sleeping well, which is a huge priority of mine.
So you are sleeping properly now?
I am absolutely trying my absolute best, like early bedtimes. I haven't used an alarm to wake me up since May last year. Other than the odd time where I'm like, I need to leave at this time.
Sure.
So I have a 5:30 alarm just in case. But most time I wake up naturally at 5 o'clock, which is beautiful. That's just fabulous to wake up and like, oh, look, I'm ready to go.
I had someone ask me, how does Bobbie maintain her intensity from week to week? And I think rather than just saying the word intensity, like, how do you keep you've been doing this for a long time now at a high level with heavy weights. How do you maintain that motivation for every training session? Because you never whinge. I've got clients who I can't say the same thing about.
Very different.
And they've not been doing it for as long as you have. So what is it you think? What do you think's the secret to staying motivated and training week in, week out with like a good intensity? Is there a secret, or is it just how you are?
I love this question. So when they say intensity related to training, like that motivation and I just love the sport, like I just love it. I really love going to the gym, competing and lifting things. Like it's like so simple. Like I had this question a few months ago and I was like, yeah, I just love it. So like I go into the gym and don't get me wrong, there are times. As
I was just about to say, are there times where you don't want to train?
100%. I told you after Sheffield actually, there was a session, my last squat session. And literally, right, I'm sat on the bed, and this is when basically life is quote unquote a bit too much. There's too many things going on, and I'm still learning how to navigate all of this and saying no and all the rest of it. And I remember being sat on the bed and it's getting later and I noticed that there's a time when that's the time when we train, that's the time when we prioritise. And when it moves outside of that sometimes, I'm like, okay, right, I'm going to go and train. And Ryan's daughter came into me and I'm crying because I don't want to go in.
And just to let everyone know, this is her last big squat session before Sheffield. It's the heaviest weight she's ever lifted in prep. This is going to be
ever, yeah. So obviously, like this
it's quite an important one.
Quite an important one.
Which is probably why you were setting, because there was a lot of pressure on this session.
Yes.
Which is probably where all this comes from. But.
Potentially so, especially because there was, as we discussed after Sheffield, there was a lot sort of going on and I was trying to navigate it all. And I was like, right, I was sat on the bed and I was like, Amelia, bless her, Ryan's youngest, came in. I was like, Bobbie, what's wrong? And so she's so cute. And obviously I'm going to be honest with her and say, to be honest, Mimi, I don't want to go in the gym. That's what I'm dealing with right now. However, I'm going to go and do it anyway. And so what I did in that situation was I put my hair in plaits, put my hat on, I put my little SBD hat, I put my favourite singlet on, the orange one, and I was like, I'm going to go and do this damn squat regardless. And I did it. And it was really strange as well, because as soon as I decided we're going, it just changes. Stop the crying. And I'm like, I can do this. And we're going to go in and we're going to smash this. And as soon as I entered the gym, it was like that crying Bobbie had disappeared. sometimes you got to go through that. And like sometimes I tell myself, why the hell do you do it? I know why the hell I do it, because I love it. And I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got. And I made 182 move better than ever in that training session. So that's what can happen, guys.
But I think that's part of your process, is almost acknowledging the fact that you're stressed about it. Like you said, that having that little cry.
Yeah.
Not like denying it, not pretending it isn't there. Mm-hmm. Feeling it and then going, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah. I remember my sports psych saying to me, this was before Worlds actually, and she was saying, what's your superpower? And that's what she uses this all the time. What's your superpower? And my first thing I said was, sometimes, you know, when you don't feel like doing it or you don't feel like you can do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to try to do it anyway. And I think sometimes that's my superpower, because I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I get really nervous before training. It's not going to stop me. It fuels me, if anything, but I'm going to do it anyway.
That's cool. I like that. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or go over?
That's a really good question.
Because I think realistically, I think we're going to have to save Sheffield for another one, because that's going to be because we've gone for an hour and a half.
Wow.
And
intense.
An hour and a half.
Nice.
And if we're going to do Sheffield as well, I think that could be at least another hour doing that one.
Oh, it's an interesting experience.
But I hope you've enjoyed this.
I have. Thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Thank you for your time. We're going to do this again.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you want to hear more conversations like this one, please consider subscribing.